Good morning, good afternoon, and good day wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download.
I've got this.
All right.
Which is the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live, now officially syndicated through the IGBN radio network.
So close.
Damn.
Right.
The IBGN Internet Radio Network and now syndicated on TuneIn Radio. Every time you think you got it, I'm going to change it on you, Adam.
Yeah. So it would seem, Rob. So it would seem.
That's all right. That's because we keep growing. Today, we're going to discuss serenity in leadership. And with the week that I've had, serenity sounds like a good thing. We have a special guest, Thom Dennis, to help us with the discussion. With over 3 decades of experience in transforming corporate cultures and promoting psychological safety, Thom provides actionable insights on nurturing inclusive environments and balancing leadership energies. But before we bring Thom on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us? We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience, so audience participation is highly encouraged. All right, with that, introductions. Adam, would you kick us off, please?
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm very much looking forward to this. In fact, every week I'm looking forward to this because we always have great guests, don't we?
That we do. Excellent. Welcome. Tim.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tim Hughes. I'm CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm famous for writing the book Social Selling: Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And myself.
That's your introduction up.
Yes, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, a proud DLA Ignite partner, and I'm not famous for writing anything. Yet. We also have an audience member checking in. Serenity Disco says, "Hi, friends. Excited to learn more about today's topic." Hi, Serenity. Thanks for joining us. As I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Thom Dennis, CEO of Serenity in Leadership. With a background that spans from the Royal Marines to becoming a change agent and leadership coach, Thom has dedicated his career to fostering inclusive, psychologically safe workspaces and championing the balance of masculine and feminine energies in leadership. There, nailed it. Excellent. All right. Thom, welcome, and thank you for being a part of this morning's show.
Thank you. Thank you indeed. It's good to be here.
Thom, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what led you to where you are today.
I've had a varied background. Which really was influenced quite substantially from my early days at boarding school, where I experienced a headmaster who abused his position, and it led me to sort of have, as I grew up, this sense of justice. What is justice? What is fair? What is right? And a kind of sense of outrage at the abuse of power that certain people have when they are in positions of power. And really that it almost became dormant during the Royal Marines, because on the whole, the standard of leadership was extremely high. Not always, but very, very often. But when I came into the corporate world, I began again to see people in power who didn't know how to wield that with any sense of responsibility, and therefore it sort of, I think, awakened this old hurt in me, and I really became very determined to try and help leaders who've got incredibly difficult jobs, CEOs, incredibly difficult jobs, but how could they do those and bear responsibility for the outcome of their actions on the people, and now more recently, of course, the environment. So in a sort of a nutshell, that's really sort of outlining my purpose and my passion. So when I started out in the corporate world, which was back in 1991, I said I bring healing into business, because actually between leaving the Royal Marines and going into the corporate world, I became a Reiki master, sort of learning about the energy healing, and then set up my first consultancy. And so over a period of time, it sort of morphed into making organizations psychologically safe for people to work in. And that only happens when you have a leadership that has that sense of responsibility, I think.
I can only imagine that in 1991, when you spoke about healing in business, and you can see where this comment's going, healing in business and safe spaces, people must have looked at you like you had just come from another planet. You know, the spaceships come down and out comes Thom, who talks about all this mumbo jumbo. And now, of course, it's kind of normal parlance, isn't it? It's normal conversation within organizations. But in those days, I mean, I remember my working life in 1991. If I'd have said, oh, you know, I feel a little bit unsafe in this environment, someone would have just punched me.
Yes, to show that you were right. I do remember quite early on being asked to facilitate a corporate meeting of the board of directors in a place just north of London. And it was, I think the place had been built in the 1500s or something. It was very old. And when I went in there, I thought, God, the energy in this place stinks. It's awful. And so I brought some crystals with me, and I was just putting them around around the sort of corners of the room. And one of the directors came in. He thought I was planting microphones. So I wasn't quite sure which way to go with that, which was easier to explain. Yes.
Thom,
There's a saying, isn't there, Thom, which is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes, and you know, I think we're seeing examples of that in the world today, aren't we? Where governments are becoming more and more powerless and more beholden to the leaders in very large organizations. That might be controversial, but that's how I see it.
And it's because I remember when I went through the world of corporate, and it was you acted the way that everybody always acted, or kind of the way that there was that you were expected, that you thought that you were expected to act. And I remember a good friend of mine going for a meeting, and probably would have been in something like 1990, something like that. And he was explaining that maybe the job wasn't exactly how he wanted it to be, and maybe he should do something different. And the manager just said, I won't use the word beginning with F. Get on with it. Now, clearly, 30 years have gone. Water has gone under the bridge, and it's very different from that. But certainly in those days, it was how you were expected to act. You, as a leader, you just turn around and tell people to just get on with it.
And there are still organizations like that, I think.
Yeah. There's still a lot of organizations that are very command and control, top down, and stuff like that. And I think that it still exists.
yeah, there's we're in a fascinating situation. I've been asked to speak to a group of head teachers soon about resilience and well-being. And I honestly, I don't know very much about the educational system now. I'm sort of kind of out of touch with that. But I've been doing a little bit of research, and there's this resurgence of a very autocratic way of running schools now, which I had no idea about, which funnily enough originated, well, not funnily enough, it's not that surprising, originated in the US with this word slant. So we've got this continuum, I guess, from the really sensitive and caring and soft approach, if you like, to the way you teach, going right the way across now to something that wouldn't be that uncomfortable for Genghis Khan and his ilk. I think that's really interesting because I mean, they're getting very good results, you know, depending on how you measure these things. On the autocratic end, and I'm wondering what's going to happen with those people when they go out into business, because that's very unlike what typically is described as the Gen Z.
So if we've kind of talked about what our experience is and what they've been, what is it that we should be doing? You know, if we think about, I mean, I think that everybody who watches this show wants to come to work and be their best selves, because that's kind of the culture that we've tried to set and try and talk about. It's what I do. I know it's what Adam does, and I know Rob does it as well. And we don't always get it right, but we'd like to. But so, what is it that we can be doing as leaders to set the psychological safety for people, to make people feel empowered, to make people want to come to work maybe for us, or certainly the leaders that are watching?
Thom, before you answer that, because I do want to hear that answer, can you please clarify first what is meant by psychological safety, and then share with us how we would go about as a leader and implement that?
I think people feel psychologically safe when they can be themselves, and it's a sort of it's an element of inclusion. When you're in an environment where you feel like you can say something and you're not going to be crucified for it, and that it may be silly, it may be a huge mistake, and if you make a huge mistake, then you're not going to be vilified for that. You're going to be maybe encouraged, or encouraged to look at where is that decision taking us. I mean, I often do this in coaching, where it's not about saying, no, you're wrong, this is the way to do it. It's okay, if you do that, then tell me about the consequences. Or you might be coming up against this challenge. How would you go through that? So you're developing the person's agency, that awful word, but and helping them feel like by being themselves, warts and all, it's okay. So yeah, and that's what leads to a sense of real team and inclusion, which are so important. I think, you know, the moment you don't feel safe, you're going to hold back, you're going to kill innovation, you're going to kill creativity. It's not a nice place, but it's a place that an awful lot of people are very used to, unfortunately.
Adam and I did some work, are doing some work at the moment with Salesforce, the CRM vendor, and we happen to be working with a part of a team of a person who is a particularly, what I would call, an inspirational leader. And the team is just amazing. We have it's a real diverse team. There's just an energy that comes from it, and all the different personalities. It's just like, when you talk about inclusion and diversity, and that should be the driver for innovation. Sitting there this week, listening to that team from Salesforce, I just felt the energy of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, my question was, how do we create this, Tom?
Well, perhaps you should ask the leader of that team, but
we should get her on, actually.
Her name's not Vicky, is it?
No, it's not. No.
Yeah, because that's one of the Salesforce people that I know, and
I know Vicky is Salesforce as well.
I can imagine her creating the same sort of environment. I think the first thing is, we can talk about knowing oneself. I really feel like the key leadership skill for the future, for now, and the future, is self-awareness. So understanding, because if you really understand yourself and you understand your drivers and your beliefs and your values and all those kind of things, and you come into the environment with a level of humility and vulnerability, then you know that you don't know lots of things. And if you can be authentic about that and say, I come into this, I'm not the all-knowing leader, because I think in the past, leaders felt like they had to, by showing any type of weakness, that they would not be respected. And therefore they used to, that's where all the directive stuff came in. I mean, it's fascinating how many directive leaders are actually leading from a place of fear. So let's just use the dangerous word, love ourselves, and know that we have foibles, we have biases, we're human. And therefore there will be that's why I like to get a leadership team sitting in a circle, because there's very little hierarchy in a circle. And this whole concept of, you put a little table in the middle of the circle, and it's like somebody it has a problem, and they get up and they go and almost metaphorically put it on the table. This is my problem. And they go back and they talk about it, and they sit back, and then somebody gets up and says, I'll pick that up for the moment, because this is my area of expertise. And when I've done my bit, I put it back in the middle and somebody else picks it up. And the leader might just have set that up and allow it to flow, because he or she is not concerned for their ego that they somehow have got to show themselves up to be in command or in charge. They let that go. And the leadership is that creating of the space where it's sufficiently safe for people to take risks and allow what emerges. And sometimes you've got to say, whoa, hang on, we're going a bit off piste here. Let's go back. Or it looks like we're going off piste, but I'll let it run because I'm curious as to where it's going to go. Whatever. It's allowing.
You mentioned being authentic to your beliefs and values. Do you coach people in the sense of helping them discover theirs, or do you expect them to come to these meetings and such already knowing it?
I don't think one should ever expect anything, and nor judge. And I think that's one of the secrets of a good coach, is to create an environment which is non-judgmental. And that sometimes can be quite difficult, but the more that one knows oneself, the less that interferes. So no, I think that you meet people where they are, and if they're going into something where You know, it might be controversial or whatever. You might say, well, look, let's spend an hour just checking out where you're at. What are your beliefs and values? What are you bringing into the room? And how do they resonate or not with where you want to go? That might be the start point.
Yeah, I think that there is a huge amount of ego in leadership, isn't there? And you know, throughout my career, I have seen countless examples of people that are leading organizations or leading teams that are, as we said, you know, they're terrified of being seen to be anything less than perfect. And I mean, this is something that is shifting. I think that we as an organization are very good at saying, both to internally and to the people that we work with, you know more about this than I do, kind of attitude. And certainly when I've been the recipient of that sort of behavior, it's certainly made me feel much closer to the person that is leading. But it's still, it seems not, even though these are well-trodden paths, it still seems not to be the norm, doesn't it, at the moment?
Yes, and I mean, I think a classic example of this is looking at the way that MPs behave. I remember doing a retreat some years ago, which was led by someone who'd been trained by Osho in the old days, and he started every single workshop with an hour's dynamic meditation. I don't know if you've ever done dynamic meditation, but I tell you, it's incredibly hard work, unbelievably hard work. You know, at the end of this session, everybody goes off and you know, they have a shower or whatever, and then you come back and you're so sort of grounded. And I sort of had this sort of fantasy at the time, thinking, my God, if everybody had to go through this process before they sat down in the House of Commons, what a different place it would be. Because I mean, and at one level, that's just preparing them in the moment, but they're not trained. They're not taught how to lead. You know, it's just they bring in whatever experience they've had in life, which might be.
Isn't that the same with a lot of people with not just people in government? And you know, we're a global show, so not just people in government in the UK, but certainly across industry, which is, you know, what happens is you take your best salesperson or your best engineer or your, you know, the best person, and you make them the leader.
Yeah.
And what they're used to is that they're used to selling. Probably, you know, the classic is you take a lone wolf salesperson and suddenly say, you know what you like doing every day, which is going out and selling stuff and keeping to yourself. Well, now you're not going to sell anything, but you got to look after people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's extraordinary. I mean, it is such a common thing that you know, people are promoted because they're good at something, which bears no relationship to where they're being promoted. So and you think about it, and you think, where's the logic?
I mean, because if you take some of the best football managers or soccer managers, you take some of the best football managers, they actually weren't very good at football. They played it, but they weren't necessarily particularly good at it. Yep. But when they went into management, they understood the situation. But what they understood was that they understood the leadership dynamic, which was different from actually having to play.
Yes, absolutely. Completely agree.
Sorry.
We have a comment from Rob Turrell. It says, would like to hear your thoughts re board versus leadership. Safe space or straight out of Succession? I assume he's referring to the TV show. The board may only get to meet 9 times a year and include external investors and NEDs. The CEO and CFO often face a different culture at board to the one they face or the one they may show as leaders.
So a NED is a non-executive director.
There we go. Thank you.
There's a whole number of different things in there. Yeah, I think one of the difficulties with NEDs is that an awful lot of them, have got 6, 7, 8 active positions that they're filling at the moment, and that's, you get to a certain level in your career, and then you take on all these NED things, and they call it a portfolio of directorships. And I've been the non-exec chairman of a sort of medium-sized company some years ago. And that was hard work. It was hard work, really. And I had so much to learn on the job on that. But I don't know. I don't know which way to go with this question. I think that one of my experiences is that boards are actually quite distant from the executive team quite often, and there's a dysfunction on the board which tends to filter into the executive team, and of course it depends which members of the executive team are on the board as well, and how strongly an executive can hold his or her position in both camps, because they can be very, very different camps. Yes, the CEO and CFO often face a different culture at board to the one they may show as leaders. That's right, and that's wrong, if you see what I mean. It shouldn't be like that. I think an interesting reflection is Frederick Laloux and his book, what's it called, Reinventing Organizations, where he has taken examples of a number of different companies around in Europe, particularly, and shown how by really caring and creating this sort of freedom of the example he gives is that I remember is home care visitors in Holland, and this company which had all these visitors took over, and they set all these strict timings so that you could only spend so much time on an injection and only so much time on doing a bandage and all this kind of stuff. And what happened, and there was, in order to be efficient, you'd have different people going to visit the same person, and the client satisfaction went right down, because there was no care, there was no time to have a conversation, there was no relationship anymore, and so they turned it round, and did what in so many senses is sensible, apart from the data-driven, money-driven attitude, which was killing everything. And one of the things he says is that when you try and change the culture of an organization in that way, very often it's the board that gets in the way, because they are so terrified of letting go of a standard model that they understand, that they don't let the company change. And he said the best way to do this is to set up a new company with a new culture and go from there, and it's just so much easier. So I don't know, I've seen some dreadful boards full of very, very grand fromage people. So I don't know.
It's interesting to me that you said the data drove their actions, and because there was no measure of relationship or the return on investment, because there was no measure of the return on investment in relationship or humanity, it got neglected. It got disregarded completely. Is there a way to measure for humanity? How would an organization go about doing that?
Well, talk to the customer for a start. I get a delivery of organic food each week, and they've gone this way. They've got they send you a text and say, oh, we're going to deliver, and this is the time slot within which we're going to deliver, and all this kind of stuff. But you talk to the drivers, they're miserable because they used to have the same route and so on, and now it's a computer or an AI that's driving them, and you get these ridiculous texts that say, oh, we're going to deliver, and it's about within about 3 minutes they're going to deliver, and one phones up the headquarters and they say, yeah, I'm sorry, we don't have the flexibility we used to have because we've got this new system. It's like, hello.
Yeah. Well, we've improved it with a new system, which now doesn't tell you when we're going to deliver until just as we're delivering.
And there's the famous thing, isn't there, that the Amazon drivers don't have time to go to toilet.
Yeah.
So they have their own ability to do it in the vans on as they're driving around.
Yeah. Well,
because there's this prankster guy that's actually then sold the contents of what they on Amazon. If you Google it. He was walking around. He walked past this big Amazon warehouse. He couldn't understand what this yellow liquid in these bottles were all around because what happens is that if they get caught with it in the van, they get fined. So as they come into the warehouse, they throw it out the window. So there's all this yellow liquid in these bottles. So he basically thought it'd be a great prank to collect all that, put a label on it, and then sell it on Amazon. If you Google it, you'll find it. And it's like there's this these drinks from these energy drinks from these that have been promoted by influencers. It looks like one of those drinks.
Doesn't taste quite so good though.
I don't know. It might be nice.
But
we're not going to try and find out though.
By extension, you can say, what is it that is preventing governments and large organizations for actually doing what is necessary to play their part in tackling global warming? And maybe it's just only metaphorical, maybe it's actually real, but it's like we've so lost touch with, on one side, humanity, on the other side, nature. We're so out of touch. I'm not a vegetarian. I mean, I do eat some meat, but I remember doing some work for an abattoir some years ago, and actually wanting to go there and see the place and feel it, and understanding what actually is entailed in getting what you see on the supermarket shelf. And it's like, we need to do that. We need to do that. And I mean, I did a workshop some while ago where part of the workshop was actually to see an animal sacrificed, and how the whole process worked, to the evening meal where you actually ate what you had seen. And it's like you had that whole sense of a continuum, which is so natural if it's done with respect. You look at the indigenous people, and they have such respect for their environment, because they see themselves as part, but just part of the whole. And I think that where we've got to in so many societies now is that we think we're bigger, we think we're better, and we don't have to obey the natural laws and cycles. And I think that's just sad, and it does lead to these inhumane decisions that we are taking, and in losing sight of this, it creates a vacuum within which we can make decisions which are not in the interest of actually anybody except for mammon.
Well, I think what you said is a really good metaphor for the way that, you know, at a macrocosm, it's the way that we interact with our environment as a species on the planet, and in a microcosm, it's within a company, isn't it? So it's like,
Yes.
I'm going to drive increased efficiency within my company at whatever cost in order that I can make more money. And then people become unhappy and they take more time off sick and they leave, and staff churn increases and morale decreases, so work rate decreases. So the very goal that you've chased, your behavior has driven that goal out of the door. And actually, you're then fighting a rearguard action, aren't you, to try to salvage stuff, because so much of it is broken, particularly the trust between the organization or the leadership and the people that work within the organization. And I think
there's a famous saying, isn't it, that the beatings will continue until morale increases.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, I think that's very true. But I think one of the things that's interesting is that every now and again, you know, we talk to an organization, and it's clear that they are trying to do more than just assess the numbers on a balance sheet. Clearly, that's part of the purpose of the business, is to make money, and clearly what they're trying to do is to make as much money as they possibly can. But they realize it's not the only measure of success, and there are other things that need to happen, because A, they're profitable long term to do, but also B, because they're the right thing to do. And we're starting to see more of that, but it's still a long way to go, I think.
Yeah, I often talk about Patagonia, and as an organization, it's an organization I've got such deep respect for. But if you talk to them, and I did a podcast interview with the guy who used to be the head of HR, and he kind of he scoffed. He said, "Appraisals? We don't have appraisals. You know, if you've got something to say, you say it. You know, it's part of the whole culture. ROI? We don't bother. Nobody ever talks about ROI." And yet it's a $2.2 billion organization, where now it's populated, I don't know what percentage, by people whose parents worked there, and as children they were in the creche.
Yeah, my daughter bought me this for Christmas, the book of the founder of Patagonia, talking about what his vision was for it, and how he has operated the organization. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that all of his massive wealth. Have you got one of those as well?
Well, Let My People Go Surfing.
Yeah, which was his first book.
Yeah.
And then he wrote a book called The Responsible Company. And what I really liked about that was, he said people are looking to say that their company is sustainable. And he said, there is no such thing. There is no such thing as a sustainable business. We all take out more than we put in. So what we've got to be is responsible. Sorry, Adam, I cut you off.
No, I think that's absolutely right.
And you look at the dear. I mean, creches and caring for people and them as human beings, not just as workers. I mean, I was talking to Dean, this guy Dean Carter, recently, and he had a statistic that the ROI on I can't remember exactly what it was. It was the sort of family leave and integrating families into the business. The ROI was 630% roughly, and it's like, hello, that sounds like a no-brainer, and yet so few organizations do it, and it's like, well, why not? It's because they're scared. They're scared of stepping out. They're scared of losing control. This whole sense of, I need to be in control. I've got to prove myself as this leader or this really good manager. And actually, I mean, that, Rob, that's where the serenity comes in. How can we be serene as leaders? If you're really, and I'm not claiming I am a great serene leader, but I do aspire to that. But when you're coming from that place of serenity, then you're allowing, not driving or not managing. You're allowing, and things come together in a completely different way. And maybe it wasn't the way that you planned, but actually, it's rather beautiful.
But how do you convince leaders? Because this is a mind shift, and it's a polar opposite from where many leaders are positioning this. Because the impression that I get is that leaders of many organisations have they've worked their way up through the ranks. They've had to battle. They've had to work 100 hours a week. They've had to do all of these things that we think are totally unacceptable now. And then they get to the top of the tree and they say, I had to work 100 hours a week when I was your age to get to this position. Now you're bloody well going to do it as well. And we see that a lot in professional services companies,
Yeah.
Where in order to be promoted to a partner in the practice, you have to bill 2,000 hours a year or 2,500 hours a year, which is, extremely difficult to do. And why do you have to do that? We have to do that because I had to do that.
Yeah.
And that proves your commitment to the business.
Yes. I mean, what that brings up for me is something slightly different, but in the world of the law, so many pupillage barristers have to go through this sort of initiation of being abused in some way, and it's getting better, but still the misogyny that's displayed is completely horrific. But when you talk to a senior woman barrister, she'll say, oh yeah, they're pinching the bottom and all that kind of thing. You've got to have a sense of humor. You just got to get over it. And if they get through all that, they get to the top, and then they look back and they say, and when there's this tendency, it doesn't always happen, but this tendency for them to say to the young people, oh look, just grin and bear it, get through it, and it'll be all right. As opposed to saying, I had to endure that, but it doesn't mean to say that you have to. And it's,
don't you think that the Me Too movement has helped change that, or at least helped with people realizing that it's wrong?
Well, yes, and because I think there's a huge pushback now. I think there's an awful lot of people who, this resistance. You've seen it in the political world here, in the NHS, in lots of organisations where they're doing away with anything to do with DEI. Bin it. We don't have it. We're not going to spend any money on it anymore. So I mean, my next podcast, I'm just putting it together. The title is the DEI Backlash, because I think that for all sorts of reasons, Me Too was a moment, like George Floyd was a moment, and it caused all sorts of ripples in the water, if you like. But rather like the pandemic, there are still people who are now saying, "Oh, look, thank God the pandemic. So let's get back to normal." And so there is this. You're getting both here. And one of the comments there is, this a McKinsey and Bain logic that does not allow this to happen? To a degree, I think that's right. But I think that the business schools have got a lot to answer for here, because I really have a sense that a lot of them are still blinkered in this, EBITDA. If you understand what EBITDA really is, then you're going to be fine. As opposed to, let's really understand. I think that systemically, we've got to look at things systemically. What's really going on, not on the surface, but really deep down. And if we can address that, then we're going to get somewhere. But you've got to be flexible in order to do that. You've got to, like I say, take time, go out and smell the flowers, smell the roses, and ask yourself, is what I'm trying to do really in some sort of alignment with something bigger than just me or bigger than the organization? And I think being formulaic in the way that you approach change, or formulaic in the way that you introduce a strategy, will tend to produce results from a financial point of view quite quickly, but from a human point of view, very often the longer term results are actually not what you're looking for at all.
But you made reference then to business schools, and one of the things that Tim and I hate is the expression best practice. Because the point with best practice is that you're following what someone else has determined should be done, which means that by nature of the fact it's best practice, you're a follower rather than a leader in terms of how you're shaping your business. And I think that so much of the thinking that we see in business schools and in marketing qualifications is based on the way things used to be. We've got a very different demographic of people that are in the business world, both as consumers and as business people. We've got a digital first way of everything that we touch, how we shop, how we engage with people, how we communicate with people, how we build networks and forge relationships with people. And yet we still talk about digital marketing as if print marketing and TV has any relevance at all in the modern world, which of course it doesn't. And the problem is that so many of these houses of cards are built on what are now fallacies. It's the way, you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. That's what you work. You build a campaign which is multi-channel, which includes email and telephone and advertising on billboards. And it's madness, utter madness. And yet that's just the way it's always been. So that's how we need to do it. And this stuff is taught. So young people are coming out of having got their marketing degree, and they understand how to buy radio media. And what relevance does that have? Absolutely zero, but it's still being taught. And so much of this is, and we quote this quite a lot about the guy that's driving along in his car and he pulls over in the town that he's never been to before, and he says, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Main Street?" And the guy says, "Well, I wouldn't start from here if I were you." And the point is that we're in a really bad place in so many elements of business and education, because 9/10 of what's being taught is completely irrelevant today, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. I saw that one of the comments here was, how do you do the Sir Harvey Jones troubleshooter management by walkabout in this hybrid world? I think it's a great question.
For our global audience, Tom, do you want to explain who Sir Harvey Jones is?
He was he really came to fame when he was the CEO of ICI, which was the biggest chemical company, and then he had a TV program, didn't he? That I can't remember what it was called now, but
it was called Trouble at the Top.
Right. He was a kind of troubleshooter. You'd go into organizations and sort them out, and it's very interesting because I've with lots of my sort of CEO coaching clients, and really encourage them to get out from behind their desk and go and walk around and talk to people, and it's amazing the difference that can make from all sorts of directions. But now in a hybrid world, I think one of the things that they can do is to say, if you're coming into the office, you are not to do emails.
Yeah.
So part of the whole point of having meetings is to create community. And so what we need to do is to have spaces where people can get to know each other and talk to each other, preferably in an informal environment.
That, Tom, that is the best idea I have heard in 2024 so far. If you're going to come into the office, you're not allowed to send emails because you can do that from home. I think that's just absolutely inspired.
Well, yeah. One of the challenges, of course, is that if you're hybrid and one person's in Tucson in Arizona and one person is in Weybridge in Surrey in the UK, you've still got that challenge. But I think there are things that you can do to explore. One of the difficulties is when you're in a meeting online, the people who are physically together, at the end of the meeting, they go and get a coffee together and they continue a conversation, which doesn't happen for the people who were cut off. And I think that's a real challenge. But I think there has to be a way of decompressing somehow, so that the meeting ends, but you can still have interactions even online, to enable this somehow. And really being caring about how people feel, and stuff like that. Starting with how are we feeling? Let's be humans before we're business people.
Well, Rob's put a really interesting comment up there. No email, no screen time at all. Whiteboard's much more useful than yellow sticky notes. And whilst you may or may not agree with that, I actually do agree with that. I think whiteboards are a fantastic tool. I think the key point is that digital should be a platform for speeding things up and for enabling you to scale and do stuff irrespective of distances and times. Unfortunately, though, we see it as a replacement for things, don't we? So I'll send you an email rather than phone you up, or I'll arrange an online meeting rather than knock on your door and go to your office. And actually, I think that what we need to do is we need to think, as you said, about the human things, and that we should be using these technologies to bring us closer together rather than to replace human interaction.
This is maybe a side thing, but I think it's really interesting that I was hearing a teacher the other day say that kids, when they're playing a game, they can't go and do it together in the same house. They've got to be separate in their own space in order to play the game together. If they're in the same space, they can't do it. And it's like we're training kids to be separate and not to learn about human interactions without technology.
Tom, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you. How can people learn more about you? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, please email me, Tom with an H, Tom at serenityinleadership.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on, and Serenity's on Instagram and not TikTok. All the platforms except TikTok. And I'd love to continue the conversation. And I suppose that just to finish, this sense of particularly CEOs who've got such difficult jobs today, because there's so much more that they're being asked to manage and to be responsible for. And I think that if there are ways in which we can help them, I really love to do that, because it's so hard for them. I don't want people to feel like they're wrong. It's just how can you be better when there's so much pressure and so much demands on you? You don't have the space to do anything. So get in touch. LinkedIn's a good place.
I like that approach. It's not right or wrong. It's just how do you get better? Excellent.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So thank you, Rob, Tim.
If you have something to say, we want to hear from you. scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live and fill out the Be Our Guest application form. On behalf of the panelists, to our guest Thom, to our very active audience today, thank you all, and we'll see you next time on the Digital Download.